Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world. We have speakers, looks like mostly in the Americas, who are going to be speaking about the general topic of cross-cultural knowledge that will lead to business success, and in particular, language and localization. And just really pleased to see the high quality of speakers that we have here today talking about a variety of topics. I'm Doug Brunke, a CEO and founder of Global Chamber. I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, sunny and a little bit rainy because of the summer monsoons. We're enjoying global business these days very much. And also there's a lot going on around the world, if you hadn't noticed. And so between tariffs and trade wars and all sorts of noise, but fundamentally very strong global business around the world, it's, I think, really one of the best times, and certainly I think the most interesting time to be doing global business. And one of the really key aspects of doing global business is making sure that you have a knowledge of the culture and countries that you want to work with. And so we'll be focusing in on a variety of different topics today that will help you grow your business and become more knowledgeable around the cultural side of it, so that will facilitate more success. Our first speaker is calling in from the Washington, D.C. area, and she's actually a tag team. Natalia Vernigora is with Derek, and so she'll kick off the conversation. She's the executive director of Transglobal. Natalia has over 20 years of language service industry experience. She's very well experienced. She operates her company. She does a lot of work with the government, but she does a lot of work with businesses as well. And the real-time interpretation is something that they have been part of, and they're going to be talking in more detail about a new system that they have that allows that and facilitates that. Natalia, welcome. Good morning, and we look forward to hearing from both you and Derek.
Thank you. So the first thing about Transglobal, we've been in business for a long time, and especially in this DC area, and we've worked with government agencies from USAID to USTDA to Commerce, and we decided to launch a new service this week, which is why I have Frederick with me. So we have over the phone, video, remote, and that's fine for hospitals, businesses that need that help with limited English proficiencies. But what about companies that really have to have those weekly meetings or are doing seminars that need to travel? Instead of traveling and spending a lot of money, what we've done and what we believe is the best approach and the future of this industry is to leverage technology and make it so that everybody is able to connect as we are right now in a Zoom meeting. So what we have here with us today is Derek, and we're launching this platform where basically it is like a Zoom meeting, but it has simultaneous interpreting. So if Derek would please share his screen to do a quick demo. Derek? Thank you. We have Derek on the line. So this is what our platform looks like right now. We have it set for our first client, which is the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. Derek, do you mind going through it just a little bit and giving people an idea and a feel for how this works?
Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm Derek. I'm coming over from France. And I also have 25 or 30 years background in organizing multilingual meetings in Europe and a little bit in the States. We developed this app because there was a strong demand in Europe of people who wanted to have simultaneous interpreting in short time meetings that could be organized almost on request. And there was also a demand from some interpreters who said they would like to be more available to their private customers. So we developed this app that is an audio and video app which has more or less the same features than any web meeting app such as web meeting, GoToMeeting, Zoom. You can connect as many people as you want in the meeting, and you can run meetings in as many languages as you want as well. So we frequently have meetings of 20 people with active people, I mean people who can listen, see and speak in 3 or 4 languages. That's the idea. You can also connect the platform to a bunch of attendees who will be only listening and watching the videos. So basically, well, of course, basically the system is very simple. We have Arturo as an interpreter. I'm here as a moderator. So the way it works, it's pretty much the same as Zoom, except that you can see at the bottom right of the main video screen 2 flags. One is the US flag, the other one is the Spanish flag. So I don't know if you can hear what Arturo will be saying because it's only a screen sharing. But in our platform, everybody speaks on the floor. You don't have to select anything to specify that you speak a language or another language. Everything is run by the interpreter. So for example, now I'm speaking English, and Arturo, our favorite interpreter, has activated, as you can see on the right of his name, a Spanish flag. That means that he's speaking Spanish, and you people...
I wonder if you can press on the Spanish, whether if we can hear him.
Okay. Can we hear you, Arturo? Well, it's possible that the sound is picked up by...
Yeah, I don't hear anything. So yeah, that's just the limitations of just a cyber meeting. But he's in there interpreting, and say if I started to speak Spanish, he would change his flag to English or American flag, where he would say everything that's being in Spanish goes back into English. So not only are you breaking barriers as far as travel, you're breaking barriers as far as the mobility of interpreters, not having equipment, not having per diem, not having flights, expenses for such short meetings, and even, you know, weekly meetings. This is really a very good solution.
So as you can see, as a moderator, I have control over the languages of the interpreter. I switched Arturo to English, now back to Spanish. I can mute his microphone. I can mute his webcam, which he didn't activate. Well, it is here. We can see him at the bottom left. And if I click on his icon, we can see it full screen now. So we can play with all those features. I can fast reload Arturo's connection in case we find the quality is altered by, I don't know why, by the internet connection or...
And you can see he's now, you can't hear him, but you can see how he's interpreting everything that's being said into Spanish. So I guess he would start interpreting what I'm saying, so he would smile really big right now. So yeah, there you go.
And the last icon is to fire him in case he's not good enough and we want a better interpreter than him. So this works, there's only the 2 of us connected to the room, but these flags and icons that we can play with as a moderator applies to all participants. So generally when we start with new customers, some of them are lost and do not dare clicking on such or such icon, and the moderator can connect them to the right language, mute their microphone in case they have a noisy motorbike behind them or any kind of noise. And in some circumstances, as the system requires quite a lot of CPU on the computer and sometimes a lot of bandwidth, we can deactivate all the webcams and concentrate on video.
So really a moderator, Frederic, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to sort of associate it with something that people would, that know and they've been, you know, in contact with. A moderator really is what you would call maybe a cyber technician.
Why not?
Right? Running
Yeah.
the system as a technician would in a big conference, making sure that everybody hears what language does the relay, you know, enables the languages, makes sure that the people that are listening have selected it in case they haven't. So you're kind of making sure that everything is running as it should.
Yes, but it can also play a real moderator role. As I can show you there because we're not enough connected on the platform. But normally, the main video screen automatically switches on the speaker, so that interpreters and the audience doesn't have to worry about who is speaking, and do not have to try to watch on two small thumbnails who has the mic. In some cases, it takes a little while before people get organized to admit that they should wait that the first speaker has finished before he starts speaking. And there, the moderator also plays the role of a moderator, which is to keep everybody's microphones muted and allow whoever he wants, as it's been decided. So it's only to say that one of us may have, it's an option, you're not obliged to use it, but one of us may have the power to control everybody's microphone, webcams, and languages, so that you can have control over the meeting and make sure that the right participant is really connected on the right language and is not getting lost because he's scared and doesn't dare clicking on the right flag. That's it.
But the other benefit is and something that we have as well besides just equipment is that we're looking to have this as excuse me, an add-on feature where, say for example, in this case you have people from all over the world that perhaps maybe can attend or are just speaking on one subject for half an hour, say for example, they can always go on this platform and we can pull the interpreter from even just the physical and bring it all in under one. So say people that can't travel but would like to attend a global chamber conference, let's just say, they're able to attend this way without the expense of travel, additional expenses of hotel, et cetera, or maybe they're just too busy.
Okay, so this is a technology for simultaneous interpretation. It sounds like it's available now. What is the name of the technology?
Headbox is the name of the technology. There are 4 companies. We've done very, very detailed research, and we found that Headbox is the best for us.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for sharing. We do have some questions that have started to come in, so hang tight, and we're going to move to our next speaker. And Tatiana is here. Tatiana Shcherbinina, and I always am not able to do that name very well, but I apologize. Her name of her company is much easier to pronounce, Ruspan. It's a combination of Russian and Spanish, but she does much more than that. She's really, and you'll see in a moment, linguistics and translation expert, and her company is involved with both translation and interpretation. She's based here in Arizona, but she does work all around the world. Tatiana, would you come up and we'll have you talk about mistakes you should avoid when ordering translation services. And I think I'm going to have to lower the seat a little bit, or maybe raise it. So let's see how you come. Come on here and make yourself comfortable. There you go. Fantastic. Great. So, and Tatiana has a presentation, so take it away. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tatiana Shcherbinina. I hold a master's degree in linguistics and translation theory, and I have a lot of experience working as a freelance translator and interpreter in the US. Currently, I'm the director of the Ruspan Communications Group. As Doug said, we're based here in Scottsdale, Arizona. My topic today, actually we should go to the first slide. My topic today is mistakes you should avoid when ordering translation services. This topic is very dear and near to my heart because over the course of my career, I've noticed that a lot of projects suffer due to the mistakes that sometimes the clients make. So now we can go to the next slide. If you look at the slide, of course, one can argue, but in a general sense, this is how the priorities of the client, the language service provider, and the translator are going to be ordered. And generally, one can assume that it is the client who is the most concerned about the quality. And for this reason, we believe that clients should educate themselves as to how they should order translation services and make sure that they avoid some of the mistakes and ensure quality. This brings me to my first point and the next slide, which is that one of the most common problems, that especially for translators, which I can speak to, is that a lot of clients don't provide clear instructions, clear and comprehensive instructions. And by that, I don't mean general information about the target language, the source language, and the deadline. I mean all the supporting information, a standard, a style guide that translators can use. Of course, lots of language service providers sometimes can develop the standard for clients. However, I've noticed as a translator that this is not always the case and not usually the case. So if we go to the next slide. You will see that basically my company, Ruspan Communications Group, we prepared a translation style guide template, which you can use. It is a step-by-step questionnaire that will help you understand all the critical decisions that translators and translation agencies might be making on your behalf in the absence of clear instructions. And it will help you create a standard, which is, in my opinion, very important, is a very important tool to measure quality. And you can use it for many, many years. Now I'll quickly mention a couple more mistakes. We can go to the next slide. The next mistake that a lot of clients make is that they don't plan for their translation project. Unfortunately, some clients don't understand that it takes time to perform translation, and the reason why I want to mention that is because if you have a big project and you don't leave enough time, then the project will need to be split between several translators, and you might sacrifice the quality of your translation in the end. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that the next mistake that clients make is that they send sometimes non-editable file formats, which is also, it is possible to work with non-editable file formats. However, the problem is that it takes longer to translate them and it will be more expensive to translate them. Then if you want to learn more about different mistakes and how to prepare for the translation project, if you look at the next slide, you will see that another tool that my company prepared, and it's a free brochure which you can download following the link indicated on the slide. It's the 7 tips for getting the best value on translation. So this brochure will delve more into all the information that you need, which I am not able to present right now due to the short time that we have. If we go to the next slide, you can see our contact information and my email address. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me now or later. Ruspan Communications Group is interested in your success. and feel free to use the resources that we prepared for you. And I hope that all your translation projects will be done on time, in the amount of with the budget that you specified, and with high quality. Also, I want to mention very briefly that in August we're planning on conducting a webinar on how to do business in Russia. So if you're interested in that, feel free to talk to me or write me an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana, and stay close, and we'll get the information about that event up on our calendar as well, and we'll send that out with the blog post to make sure everyone will be able to attend that. So our next speaker is calling in from, zooming in from Lima, Peru. Israel Sanguineti is the CEO of Soluzioni International, which sounds like Solutions International, perhaps. We were talking earlier today in another meeting with Lima that I need to improve my Spanish, although that actually looks Italian to me. So you'll have to let us know the derivation of your company, Israel. You hold a bachelor's degree in law and political science with a master's in business administration, or MBA, where he got in Spain. He's continuing his work there in Chile on both of his education and advancement in business. His topic today is localization when doing business in Latin America. So, so I appreciate you sharing, the importance of doing business in Latin America, and hopefully some tips that we can all learn. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. Well, let me thank you for the opportunity to be here. Actually, I speak Spanish, as you know. Actually, I speak Spanish, as you know, so I really hope that my English be good enough. If not, I probably should buy some of the services you have presented before. Well, besides, I'm now at the airport. Who is not traveling international business is not really in the business. So let's start. I will talk about localization, but I don't think that we present that term as localization as well. Please put the next slide. We think about tropicalize, which in Spanish means tropicalización. Actually, that's something we do. That's something I've been doing a lot of time, more than 2 years now. It means to adapt and produce relevant content targeting Latin buyers in USA or Latin America or Europe. It means the possibility of adapt everything to the taste, to the way to think, to the cultural way to do the things in Latin America. That's that we do. That we have to do. There is a lot of cultural and environment difference. It's very important to make psychotropic change and improve sociological knowledge here. It's very interesting fact, and something we have to analyze properly, because many times in US or Europe, I've seen, or many people have seen, that people have to want to sell something to Latin America and try to sell the same kind of product than they are selling in Europe or selling in US, and actually it doesn't work that way. Latin America, the people normally have to know more about Latin America, and Latin America have many countries in different ways to see the things inside the countries. So we have to adapt that. That's what we do. That's what we propose to have to be done. So an example of this: display advertising in Caribbean places or Caribbean countries are more colorful than in US cities. also similar in the country versus larger cities. Normally the advertising has to be darker, have to be less colorful, because the people in the country or the people in Caribbean are more used to see brilliant colors or sunny stuff. It means that we have to adapt even the advertising. For example, let's put a logical and more known perhaps something in the world, which is KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we have here we can have the picture of the website of Dominican Republic, which they sell the fried chicken with biscuits. It means, and Pepsi. It means tropicalized because they eat biscuits. Please put the next one. Also, we can see the same Kentucky Fried Chicken in Venezuela, and you can see that they sell chicken with fried yuca, manioc, and arepa, which is is made of corn. It's a kind of liquid of corn. So it's different. It has been adapted also with Pepsi. Please put the next one. Here we can see KFC in Lima, which is different. We have the fried chicken with fries, and you can see the Inca Cola at the bottom at the end. It's a soda. We sell it here, compete the first place in the market with Coca-Cola. It's the same label of Coca-Cola here. Is Inca Cola. Is a Peruvian company, and also you eat everything this with chili, with lots of chili. So it's different. It has to be adapted. So if I think if KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, all these big food companies has adapted, obviously we have to. Please put the next one. We have a different one here. This is a sparkling wine. It's Italian, and you can see the name of the trademark is Follador. I don't know if some of you know something about the Spanish, all right? But Follador is not a great word. I don't know if you know the meaning, but it's something. It is something like I don't want to say a difficult or strong word here, but it's something that is clearer in a different way. So this is difficult in Spanish country because it means something not good. You can see. This is an example. This is another one that was adapted by Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi has a model, as you can see, Mitsubishi Pajero, and it was adapted to Latin America and was sold like Montero, like it's a last name here, because Pajero means a different stuff. I prefer not to say this in public, but it's a different kind of word. It's kind of quite offensive, so we can try. We have to adapt. Okay, please present the next one. We have seen some examples to adapt to tropicalize from US to Latin America, and some of Mitsubishi, which is Japanese, to Latin America, some Europe as a Follador to Latin America. Now we can see an example from tropicalize from Latin America to Latin America, because we have different ways to see the things, different cultural skills and ways to think in different countries. You can see this is a restaurant have tropicalized very efficiently. You can see an arepa, and this arepa is filled with lomo saltado, which is a kind of beef, a salted beef with tomato and onions and everything. It's a typical dish from Peru, and arepa is typical from Venezuela, and also a different kind in Colombia. So this has made a fusion of two dishes in two different countries and presented in US. These have been selling in US to Latin American public, and also I have seen many US public people eating this because they have adapted that. They have to tropicalize, and this is an example, or another example in English and in Spanish. You can see coriander, which means cilantro in Spanish. In Peru, it's called culantro. Culantro could be misunderstanding because the first part of the word culantro means it could be understanding in English as the word as. So it could be misunderstanding even in Spanish. So we have to work very hard in adapt taste, in adapt presentations, and in adapt names, because there's a lot of examples in the world that some sales are lost because that's, for example, when KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, went to China, I remember that the translation wasn't totally, and it says something like eat your finger in Chinese, and also we can see different stuff. For example, like Electrolux went to US, puts sucks like nothing, thinking sucking, but not that way sucks. It was a misunderstanding. So we have to work a lot in this. That's what we do. That's what we think it has to be done in international business. Well, I know this is a short time, so I would like to talk more about it, but thank you. You have my email, and you can connect with me and ask anything you want.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Israel. This is back to Doug, and we have our next speaker who will be covering another important part of the world. That's Todd Cornell, who's calling in from Colorado today. His company, Culture 668. He'll be talking about cross-cultural and localization needs for a very important country, China. Very impressive background with China, many times there. He's certified fluent in Mandarin Chinese himself, and he helps companies be successful there and around the world. Todd, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Doug. And I'm happy to be here. Great opportunity. Glad to be able to share some of my experience. And I agree 100% with Israel when he's talking about the importance of choosing words and adapting to cultures. Coca-Cola, when they first went into China, they made some big mistakes when they were naming the drink, and actually were talking about something that had to do with death. And so these are really important things that we need to pay attention to. So I have a lot that I want to talk about, and so we can get started. I wanted to start out with just explaining a little bit about the influence of Chinese culture in East Asia. There are several countries in East Asia who traditionally used the Chinese written language. That would be Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, which still uses some of it as they call it kanji. So the Chinese language has influenced a lot of East Asia. That being said, that means that philosophy has also been brought through, because the Chinese language maintains a certain amount of philosophy and mindset just within the characters alone. So there's 3 pillars of Chinese philosophy. That means this is what basically Chinese culture is based on, and that is Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. Those are the 3 philosophies that the Chinese culture are established on. So basically everything that is Chinese, or within these countries that have been strongly influenced by Chinese culture, are also taking on a lot of these philosophies. And these philosophies also have a lot to do with the social makeup and the values of the people, the way they think, their ideals, relationships, and how relationships are formed. And then we come to the yin-yang, and yin-yang is a very important concept in Chinese culture. Yin-yang is basically, we would simplify it and say male and female, black and white, but it goes much beyond that. Yin-yang is actually something that is seen as constantly in flux, never is it in one consistent area. It's constantly moving. And so having said that, if we think about the thought process, we can look at how good and bad may not be just it's good always or it's bad always, but the good can become bad and bad can become good. And the same with right and wrong. We can have a certain amount of sort of like crossing borders that for us in Western thought process may be hard to understand, which influences a lot of how the people think. And then how the language takes on the yin-yang also. If you could just go back to the slide. I jumped ahead of yin-yang and I went to thought process, sorry. So the language also expresses a lot of that yin-yang aspect. So just how the makeup of the language works. Size is made up of the characters big and little. So in order to say the word, the noun for size, it's big, little. And power is made up by the character start, close, or open, close. And so these are the ways that the culture has created new meanings and new words, and almost in an yin-yang style, having those opposites. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So when we're going into these other cultures, we want to consider our culture and also consider their culture. So language is one thing that's really important, and I know that people have already been talking about language, but a lot of times I find that when I'm referring to a Chinese English dictionary, I find that a lot of times the English is not really what the Chinese means. There's a difference there that's going on, and sometimes that can create some misunderstandings. Things that don't translate, which require a dual mindset. So there's an expression in Chinese, a white horse is not a horse, which was something that goes back thousands of years and was talking about a man who's going through a gate or a pass on the Great Wall, and he's riding his horse, and the person, the guard at the pass wants him to pay because he says every horse that goes by needs to pay a tariff. And the man said, a white horse is not a horse. And by saying that, he was able to convince the man at the gate that he didn't have to pay a tariff for a white horse because it's not a horse. So these are the ways that the mentality of the Chinese people are strongly influenced by their language. There's an expression in Chinese which is 以后再说, and it actually literally means talk about it later. But what they're actually saying is that I really prefer not to talk about this anymore. So when somebody says that, how is that translated? How is the person who's doing the translation, are they able to cross that dual cultural mentality and help the person? And how do you help that person to understand? Well, what they're saying is we'll talk about it later, but actually they don't want to talk about it. So these are just some of the challenges that the language brings around. Philosophies, bringing up the ideals, the morals that influence individuals and their values, are very strongly influenced by Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Buddhism, I think we have a basic understanding of that. Taoism is basically an overall universal ideal. How is the universe coming together and how do we work and interact with that? And then Confucianism basically is talking about social interactions. And so these are things that are very strongly interacting and influencing the people in their concepts of right and wrong, trust and friendship, which are very different from the West. Humor is another thing too that I'm sure all across this whole scope that we're talking right now, the global scope, that humor is not the same, just even between the United States and England. We even speak the same language, but our humor is very different. In China, laughing doesn't always mean that something's funny. It could mean they're very embarrassed, they don't know how to react, or they're not sure what to do next. So cultural considerations for Asia. Personal space is very different. You'll tend to be touching people more. Group society versus individualism. In Asia, when a person writes an address, they start with the country, the city, the street address, the business name, and the individual. So that puts the individual at the bottom of that list. In China, people don't tend to say thank you if they really see you as a friend, and I'm sorry isn't something that you would really just say to somebody you don't know when you bump into them. Relationships take a long time. The expression, you'll know a horse's strength over many miles and you'll know a man's heart over many days. So relationships are very important in Chinese culture. language considerations. So we want to avoid slang, cliches, make things simple. And then consider that when people are speaking to you from a tonal language background, that sometimes their tones may come across sounding a little awkward, even sarcastic, and that may not be what they're trying to come across. So listen to the words and don't listen to the intonation. In the Chinese language, there's only a present and past tense that's really recognized linguistically. So that tends to give challenges too in the discussions, really understanding the time frame and things like that. And business considerations for China. So relationships, this is the first time I brought up relationship in this presentation. Relationships are the most important aspect of the Chinese culture. When you're dealing with a business, pricing that comes to you easily most likely is saying that there's room for calculated negotiation to a lower price. Calculated meaning you don't just want to negotiate, you want to negotiate in a way that is going to not make them feel like you're negotiating. So if you want to negotiate a lower price for a similar quality, that's possible. But if you want to try and negotiate for a deal that you already have going to get a higher price for a better quality, it's probably better to just negotiate a new deal. Chinese contracts are legally binding in China. English translations are not. And things may take a little bit longer, but that's sort of the way it is when you're in a culture that's 5,000 years old or more. Trust, don't be an open book. You want to know as much about the people that you're working with, but you also want them just to know the important aspect, the most important things about you. Don't just be an open book to them. And you're going to want to get support from people of your own cultural background who have a good understanding of the Chinese culture and language in order to help you. So a little bit about the One Belt, One Road, which is an upcoming presentation. I believe it's next week, maybe, or next month. So I just put this in here to do a little lead into that. So I can't see the side over here. I don't know if I can make these things. Let me see. No. So the initial focus is basically of the One Belt, One Road Initiative or Belt Road Initiative is the infrastructure investment, education, construction materials, railway and highway, automotive, real estate, power grid, and iron and steel. And it's estimated that the Belt Road Initiative is one of the largest infrastructure and business and investment projects in history. And as of 2017, it's already including over 68 countries made up of 65% of the world's population and 40% of the global gross domestic profit. The Belt Road Initiative addresses infrastructure gaps and has been a potential to accelerate economic growth across Asia Pacific and Central and Eastern Europe. So there's going to be a lot more talk about this upcoming, so stay tuned for that. And thank you very much.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you very much. I think we do have one more speaker. Clevia, are you there? I'm seeing that we're having some technical difficulties. Usually Dallas is pretty reliable, so apologize, Clevia, if you're there. Yeah, we'll switch into some Q&A at this point, unless you're there, and then hopefully you can respond through whatever technology you're able to. Okay, so I'll move on to questions and answers. So Natalia, would you come up, and I'll step aside. And so one of the first questions we have, this is regarding the questions around, particularly the ones, Todd, that you brought up, please. And that is, you raise the issue that translations aren't always clean and clear, so whether it's Chinese or any language, and then the real meaning may be something ominous or you know, like they don't want to do it. So what you as a translator or interpreter how do you deal with that? Do you deal it in the moment? Do you deal with it later? What would you suggest on that? And Todd, if you're there, please go ahead, or if anyone else wants to handle it relative to their own languages that you're involved
Are you
with.
speaking to Tatiana or to me?
Well, I was hoping Todd would be able to. It sounds like he's having some trouble.
Oh, no, I can give my input on that because I've done a lot of translating simultaneous and interpreting and whatnot in meetings. And I find that it can be very awkward if you bring something up like that in the meeting. The way that it should be dealt with in Chinese culture is that you just kind of go with the flow, go with what's correct, and that would be just to say what they said, but later on to follow up with them and explain to them the cultural implications of what it really means, so that then they can do things accordingly. If necessary, and they're asking for an immediate response to something, I would ask for a 10-minute break where we could have sort of a little discussion on the side.
Okay, that makes sense. Natalia or Tatiana, do you have any perspectives on that with some of the work that you've done, or Israel?
I think that, go ahead.
This is always a very difficult situation, and basically you just have to try to find some type of balance. Of course, it's a little bit easier sometimes to handle it when you're interpreting, doing oral interpretation as opposed to written translation, because when it's written translation, you can't put in parentheses, another version or another possible version. You have to choose one variant and stick with it. So, but yes, it's basically about trying to find the balance based on the context that you're provided. That's why the context is very important.
I think it's up to the LSP and also the translator to really look at what the message is rather than just translate words. So contextually, Americans tend to use things like, well, we're on the ball. We had a problem with a project where there was a picture, was a sports manual, and the phrase on the ball did not necessarily mean literally. And interestingly enough, it was translated literally on the ball in Chinese. And of course, everybody got very upset. But that's what I find is the biggest challenge. The challenge is to find an individual that does speak, say, Chinese and is a translator of Chinese that really truly understands the way Americans speak and the terms that they use, like on the ball is as an example. And I feel like that's where the trouble begins, when you have creative writing that is taken very literally. That's where you get, your ancestors are dead, when you're meaning, Coke makes you alive, right? I've heard that story, by the way. So yeah, and it's amazing that it actually got through any kind of quality control checks. But it happens, I guess. That's what my input is.
Okay, very good. And this is Doug again. Sorry I'm not on the camera. I'm here next to, here in Scottsdale, next to Tatiana. The question then of, at a more macro level, other than like a specific business meeting, there's a lot going on in the world around trade and tariffs and a lot of noise. And a lot of it has been kind of inspired by a U.S. government that is different and communicates in a different way. And so the question mainly is around China, but let's leave it more open. How is kind of the activity, the tariffs and the trade war impacting, our business with China, and how are they perceiving what's going on? And maybe more broadly, and maybe Todd, if you want to take this, and I know that the rest of the speakers also are aware of kind of global dynamics. Certainly the things that are going on are rude, and even to Americans. And so, how is this strategy being perceived? Let's start with China. from your own perspective and thinking about kind of in your contacts there, how do you think this is playing in China? Let's start there.
This is not an easy question to answer, but I would just say that, first of all, we go back to Chinese culture is 5,000 years old. We have tons of philosophers and thinkers, and we have things that are going on in that culture that just absolutely we can't fathom, we can't even consider to understand the depth that that culture holds. From that perspective, we are in a much weaker position because we don't understand them. And that's what comes from The Art of War. The Art of War, Sun Tzu, when he wrote The Art of War, one of my favorite expressions by him is know yourself and know your opponent. It does say adversary, but I like to say opponent. Know your opponent and you'll win 100 battles. You'll be successful at everything that you do. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls of our government and our society as a whole, is that we aren't interested in learning about the culture of others. Therefore, we're actually making, or languages, and therefore we're actually making ourselves more ignorant as we move forward. The more that we learn about others, the stronger we become and the more powerful we become. It's not the opposite. It's not, we shouldn't be afraid of learning about others. We should be afraid of not understanding others, because when we don't understand them, we don't know the proper way to interact with them. And so this is, I think, we're only showing that ignorance to China and to the world, but China's very conniving in their own way. They know how to work through these things. They've done it. That's an aspect of their culture. They have the mentality that if I can't get revenge, then I'll have my grandson do it for me. It's not like I have to do this right now. So there's a lot of different ways of perceiving this stuff, and it can be pretty complicated, but I don't think we're doing a really great job, unfortunately.
Okay. Natalia or Tatiana, do either one of you want to kind of handle that from an overall negotiation standpoint? I think a lot of us who have done global business have always kind of come from a moment or a place of respect and understanding and on the one side, and quite honestly, when you're really polite and really respectful and knowledgeable, my own experience is, it takes time, but that seems like a really good track to be on from a business perspective or a country perspective. And what's happening now seems very foreign and not very positive. So I remember early in my career, there was a guy I went to a University of Michigan class, and he worked for an oil lubricant company, and he was teaching us on international business. And he got in front of the room and he sat back in his chair and put his feet up on the desk and said, culture doesn't matter. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to understand anybody else's culture. You've got a product to sell. You just sell it and don't worry about all the details of culture. Well, I've spent the last 20 years saying, wow, I met this guy at the University of Michigan who was crazy. And yet here we are kind of in a world where it seems like we're putting our feet up on the desk and showing the bottoms of our souls. And is that ever a good strategy? Maybe it is. I don't know. What about for Russia?
I absolutely agree with Todd that Americans should learn more about other cultures, because it's only gonna make them stronger. And I think it's the wrong strategy to just ignore everyone. And well, you have to, I don't like talking about politics, because in my opinion, translators, they should be unbiased. And this is our main quality, is to stay unbiased so that we can do our job the best we can. Because when you start becoming biased, you can insert some mistakes, you can misinterpret based on how you want to see the situation. So, but generally, I think both Todd and Doug are right.
Gotcha. Yeah, and going beyond the political side of it, I definitely don't want to go there here now, but undoubtedly there are times when you're involved with translating and interpreting, or your team is, and there are uncomfortable things being discussed. And so how do you stay unbiased? How do you kind of cleanly stay out of your own opinions and just kind of get right down into, you know, maybe working for your client, right? You're working for the client and doing what's best for them. So you're reading between the lines, you're, especially in Asia, right? You're understanding all of those things. So how do you stay unbiased, and how do you make sure that you're giving your client kind of the real deal?
I think Tatiana has said exactly what you're asking. It's important as an interpreter, translator, especially an interpreter when you're doing simultaneous interpreting, to just say what's being said. And a lot of times I notice that Chinese interpreters like to interject a lot of things that aren't being said. But what happens is then they're doing exactly what Tatiana said that you should not do as a professional translator. And the American Translation Association requires translators to translate what is being said, the meaning, and not adding things to it, because that actually changes the meaning, which is not what a good translator should be doing.
Well, there's definitely a code of conduct. For example, we belong to NAJIT, which is the National Association of the Judiciary, and probably that is the most important place where you really need sort of a code of conduct, because people's lives are, at stake. And you always speak in the first person. You never embellish. You always just exactly what is being said must be interpreted in the first person. So there is a code that has to be adhered to by interpreters, and they know it as professional interpreters because they're trained to interpret in a certain fashion. And I think that's where you can find the professional interpreters versus the not so professional interpreters. That's the biggest distinction between the two. There's no room for partial or interjecting that's just completely unprofessional. They can be dismissed.
Gotcha. We just have a couple minutes, and so I'll kind of be feeding off of that. And Tatiana, you shared kind of problems that happen and the risks involved. How do you know you're getting good service? What are the indicators of that? If you, as a client of an interpretation and translation company?
It's a very good question, of course. First of all, you need to know, this is why we prepared the documents, the resources that we prepared, so that you can educate yourself and know even how to talk about your project. You should listen to the people you're talking to, see whether they make a good impression or a bad impression, look at their credentials, maybe talk to some of their past clients. But basically familiarize yourself with the quality control, what the quality control is. And the reason why I so much advise and recommend to everyone to go ahead and download our translation style guide template is because when you are comparing two documents, this is one level of quality control, is to just simply compare two documents, proofread the documents, then check it again, do the final eye inspection. But this is on the level of two documents. The translation style guide creates a standard for all your documents, not just two documents. These are the rules that are going to be followed year after year on all your projects. That will help you keep consistency, keep accuracy, the same terminology, no matter how many translators are involved or how many translation agencies are involved in your project.
Very good. Well, I think we've come to the end of our hour. We'll have follow-up questions. We have some more questions, and those of you, all of our speakers, if you weren't able to cover all the topics, follow up with Cesar internally. We do have that next China meeting next week, the 19th. Please attend. Thank you all to presenters. A round of applause from our audience. and we'll be posting this later to be able to watch. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll be right back.
Tatiana, what's the name?
I'm still here.
That's all I know. Hi.
I'm from Hermosillo, Mexico.
Oh, begin.
I'm the executive director of Quebec.
Oh, I see. How long does it take to get here?
It's just a 6-hour drive.
Wow. So is that like in the central part of the country?
We're just 6 hours south drive
Oh, I see.
to Tucson, Dallas, and then a couple of hours and a half south. That's Hermosillo.
So tell me something, the stuff that's our country is doing about the law. How do you know much about that? How is that affecting things?
Well, yeah, it makes noise and situation, but you would just try, keeping on with our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, well, just there's one thing, building things people are paying. That's all.
Oh,
We want to put it, you put the wall, whatever.
yeah.
But that's the only deal, And we're trying, we're always getting used now to
Yeah.
the new politics. I think it's working fine.
So there would be like checkpoints to allow interstate commerce to go through.
I have no idea how that's going to work. Actually, all the states are connected, we're on the federal, so everything is okay. The thing is the new policies when crossing from Mexico to the US, that's when things are getting a bit rougher for some products. And Mexico then fights back as well as some China and many other countries.
Yeah.
When tariffs are involved, so tariffs place a tariff. But you did a great job. We got to stop this. This is like kids playing, like kids trying to share their toys. Call your phone number. They didn't know that it's convenient to call them. It's creamer, like one avocado to come before coming or products that are well liked, and also Mexico, like American products and stuff coming.
So are there still a lot of people coming from Honduras and El Salvador get away from the violence of the
And then Texas is a big. Is that an office calling?
No, it's actually
Wow.
yes,
Okay, luckily the government did help out.
this is Transglobal station.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as the war, so I texted you a couple of good role of the society. Worked out well. You can notice something when on one. And I thought your topic was really good. Is that available now? We're giving them the opportunity.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I tried to keep it short because user kept telling people that should make it like 5 minutes long.
Moving from one country to another, so maybe you need to change the way you're dealing with them, like background checks or something.
Yeah.
This person, the questions or bunch of questions, positive city. Give them the opportunity. There was
Yes.
question
Like
artificial intelligence.
Yeah. But you still want to get out. Don't want any bank robbers.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you just want to make sure, exactly, you just want to make sure those orders are not going to keep well, but you never know, of course.
Yeah.
It's going to give it time. If we did the correct decision, hopefully it was for lots of families, so.
Yeah.
Kind of rebuild it better. That's still, we're seeing it very hot, just like Phoenix, Asia.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
I'm a little bit familiar with China, that's about with Japanese. And I wasn't just to get into the flow of the conversation. So the words themselves are less important than
Arizona
macro
Hispanic Chamber of Commerce
question. I think the bigger issue is, I want buyers. They're very interested.
Yeah, because they have a very
they're
big
saying.
presence here.
Right. Kind of go process it in their heads once you kind of see how once you've had failures and successes. Too many. I mean, it's hard to describe to come to Phoenix. Like it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
I was younger, and Japanese. At least what we just heard was they want to buy your product, so you just have to kind of do this. Business just like that.
Oh, so let me ask you something.
It's
I'm
in
going to
there.
go to Rocky.
I'll get back to you, but I mean, they don't like your product.
On the reverse side, right? So I think for coming, I think that's available in every language. Every culture has its own way. You're just saying they're interested or they're not interested. That's
Yes.
more than your words.
Well, all I have is a driver's license.
Oh, yeah, then you need your passport. Once you try to cross from one country to the other, you
Yeah.
definitely need your passport.
Oh, okay.
And let me tell you, I don't think you have oh yeah, when coming to Mexico, a certain amount of miles, you need to present your passport and ask for a certain permit, just as when you come to the US. Okay. That's totally needed. And then when you come back into the US,
Especially if you're doing like
you need it both ways.
Yeah.
grammatical stuff, it's structured properly grammatically,
That's worth it.
then
Having
it's going to
having
be
that, getting to know a little bit more. Have been to Mexico lately?
unless
Yeah.
there is some terminology or something to think about.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Google doesn't
You know,
know.
the point is growing, and
Conversation.
hopefully we'll be getting new tours and hotels.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the way we
Well, yeah.
structure sentences and how
Yes,
they
so Mexico can be probably many times multiple
Oh, yeah.
sentences, a story, see you sometimes.
What about what you see
Yeah.
in translation on Twitter?
There's a good relationship going on both. We're trying to keep it tied together. I mean,
You know what kind of algorithms they're using?
Oh, okay. So what types of businesses do you
And then I'm also
really try to include into the organization?
well, now it's just gotta be this way. We're looking to go ahead and jobs.
Yes.
So sometimes, all the times, businesses.
I think it's good though, it's like,
We had some medical devices businesses that want to start selling Latin
I think
America,
YouTube has
the US, and
now
then
they
we have
translate like
other
lines for
type
you,
of
so now
producers
you watch the
and
video and
different
read
type
the English
of
with it.
companies
Yes.
can buy the
Then
anyone
it's translated as like.
who wants to have contact or
So
make
I'm wondering if
business
they're using,
in
they're
a
all
country.
using the same
Well, that's
technology.
the main idea.
Interesting.
That's what Globinar for. How we the companies connect with one another, with their large database, to help know. Once I get a new member from the CEO, immediately have a meeting with them. With how they have diagnosis. Once these folks obtain the CSAR,
And you can actually,
immediately
correct the translation.
sometimes you get
So
also
that,
sometimes
so that
regular
it
results, sometimes you may not
learns
get results.
Yeah.
how
Company
to
that's getting
translate,
slow
what
changes
in
have
the
to know
process of
that,
translating.
okay, we're going to touch it as possible to connect.
Yeah.
Hopefully the business you start selling along the line, maybe on the potential supply or, you know, that's valid. There's all sorts of nice circumstances. And of course, that's the little chambers that try to part of the activities and try to do other things. I mean, a lot of controls on the job. It's just so hard to imagine.
What you do full time?
Right now, I'm a business consultant, so I really help companies in Mexico with a lot of projects. My job, I do a little bit into franchises, and I'm a bit trying to develop new businesses, also just in time. Postman, weekly training, and what my new project is about when we come up with a farmer.
What?
Creating farms.
Cricket. Like the little bugs?
Little blocks. The whole world is the subject going
Well,
on
this
board
is
like
the
entomology.
problem a lot of the times because
Crickets are food.
why
So they're developing in Montana, many places in the U.S. They're creating this new breed of cricket that's totally sterile and consumed. So it's a very interesting subject. Yeah, it sounds like geeky, but once you add value to the product, it's a little different. You know, we're getting, for example, if you change weight,
Yeah, but you need to eat like a fowl.
definitely barbecue, fried crickets. That's the business model. And then you gotta change the ways of thinking. It's difficult in the beginning, but once you taste them, you're like, wow, this is actually good. And the benefits are there. Lots of protein, other things, lots of iron, minerals.
Yeah.
The critters are good. And I took a forward training over there. Learning how.
Oh,
It's an interesting subject.
yeah,
There's not many countries in the world that
but
are
you need like,
developing entomology.
you know, so many of them to,
Yes. But they also reproduce. You see
So
rabbits
that they
reproduce
could
quickly.
go back to
That's
the
right,
original
crickets.
really,
They go faster. So and their lifespan is kind of short. It's only around 6 to 8 weeks.
oh,
So they need to go up and harvest them. So interesting business. And hopefully open one of the first farms in Mexico will like such an idea.
So basically, there are all kinds of
I'll
issues
draw
that arise.
have it slowly being
And
accepted.
make the decision.
Right now, this has changed a lot. Like sushi, for example.
yes.
That's an example of the try to make us try to talk about pots. For example, like shrimp. Crickets are more related to shrimp.
But they're even smaller.
Yeah, they're smaller, but they're part of the same family. It's like bird shrimp.
If you have
Will
multiple
be a type. It's more related to crustaceans, to lobsters, crabs, and other animals.
And then
No,
That's something interesting.
yeah,
Exactly. And that's how it's working. And
not for me.
yeah, it's not probably.
Yeah,
There'll be like something long term that somebody wants to try, give them a shot at.
Yeah.
That's how it's working.
oh,
Yeah, I'm on it, working on it, and hopefully it will be good. So I think get these questions answered and then. Is there anything that you need?
No.
Okay. It sounds like you've made a little bit of a shift in the business.
A little bit. Well, I told you that I've been studying digital marketing
Yes.
and now I'm preparing. I've been working a lot recently
make a right turn.
aspects of business and my own personal development.
Don't fall in that hole. Yeah. Too late. Hello, this is Christian Vernigora from Hermosillo. Thanks for meeting. So, thanks for coming. So, you wanted to chat, and I've got to speak with Christian as well. How much time do you have? Okay, a few minutes still, so. Okay. Okay. You can sit in the bar and refer to us.
Well, it was kind of more of a personal thing.
Okay, okay. So why don't you and I talk, and then follow up.
Okay.
And then, how about you and I chat whenever you're ready? It sounds like you're kind of gone into a different marketing mode. So I'll download what you've got. I'd like to read it and kind of see what you've done there, and let's chat maybe in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much.
Cesaro will probably be back with you even today with additional questions.
Oh, okay.
Feel free, and then Natalia, you can send out blog posts.
Sure.
Whatever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief, let's get some coffee.
I already got some.
Oh, okay. I haven't got any, so.
You can have your meeting here, or?
We'll probably meet in here. Yeah, or we can move to my desk if you want to stay here, and then I'll move my stuff.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of places where you can sit outside, so
Okay.
have a coffee or something while wait.
Very cool.
Right.
Oh, we still have the camera on. That's interesting. End meeting.